Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people, dealing with topical issues, and today we welcome back a good friend.
Yes, third appearance of Bob Burke, a really good friend. He's an author, attorney, and historian, and just a prolific writer of nonfiction. And we're really pleased to have him back. Tell us what's going on.
I wish I had read as many books as he's written. That's one of the scary facts about his professional career. It's amazing. Bob Burke, historian, attorney, and a good friend to both Kent and myself and the state of Oklahoma. We'll be right back with that show on The Verdict.
Okay, very good.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy, on the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Yeah, it is a genuine pleasure today for me to be able to introduce our guest, Bob Burke. Bob is an Oklahoma City lawyer, has been here for many years. He is an author, an attorney, and a historian, but we've also added to the title of the show, and friend. He has been a good friend to me and to Mick for many years, and we're just pleased always to get to see him. He's so busy, we have to catch him as he goes down the street by the studio and grab him and have him come in and do a show with us. He is still in the active practice of law in workers' compensation area. He has authored more nonfiction books than anyone in history, according to the Hall of Fame, Oklahoma Hall of Fame. He's always very busy, but he's always accessible to his friends, and we really do appreciate it. Bob, it's so good to see you. And
hey,
welcome
thank you,
back.
Kent. Mick, it's good to see you guys. Y'all look younger than the last time I saw you. Really.
Must be a lot of makeup.
Makeup, that's right.
I have new glasses, too.
Well, since you were last on our show, I think you've probably written several dozen books. We can't talk about all of them.
Well, you know, the reason I write nonfiction is because truth is stranger than fiction. And Oklahoma stories are just so wonderful. I mean, they, from great contributions that people have made to weird things and to sad things. There's a sad chapter of Oklahoma history. My latest book, number 150, is called Throwaway Kids. It's about a lawsuit of 44 years ago that a young legal aid lawyer downtown Oklahoma City filed against Lloyd Rader and the welfare department. Mr. Rader was the most powerful person in Oklahoma through about 5 or 6 administrations. And the lawsuit was over what turned out to be horrific, just unimaginable treatment that juveniles were being subjected to in 6 Oklahoma juvenile institutions. Judge Ralph Thompson oversaw that lawsuit for 20 years, and at the end of that, Oklahoma corrected the problems. But meanwhile, back in 1978, in the early 80s, Barbara Walters, as a brand new host of 2020, came to Oklahoma and did a segment on 2020 called Throwaway Kids. And so I used that title for the book. It's a sad chapter of Oklahoma history. The U.S. Senate found there were thousands of incidents of mistreatment, the raping of girls, 13, 14-year-old girls by staff members in institutions. But the Senate issued a 600-page report. The Gannett newspapers, including Channel 5 that they owned here in Oklahoma City, won a Peabody Award for a series called Oklahoma Shame. And so it is a sad chapter, but it needed to be told because we learn from history not to repeat mistakes of the past. And we were doing it the wrong way. In fact, that lawsuit, it's called the Terry D. lawsuit, because Terry D. was a kid, a minor in the system who happened to be the first name listed of the plaintiffs. And that caused the entire country to treat juveniles in a different way.
Let me start with this. Lloyd Rader got taken down by this.
This lawsuit
was
caused
replaced.
him to retire. Yes.
So, in Oklahoma state constitution, it tries to diversify power. Overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
How did Lloyd Rader develop such a power structure? Why was he so powerful?
At the time, there were 28,000 state employees. He had half of them. And Mr. Rader had a file on every legislator. He could pull it up and say, if he needed something, he'd say, hey, remember, I gave Joe, Fred, Molly, Sarah, I've given all these people jobs for you, Senator, so I need for you to. And that's how he did it.
Department of Human Services.
Yes.
Yeah. So overseeing basically the Child Welfare Department.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And they monitored themselves, which was a problem. And I don't know how Alfalfa Bill Murray and others at the Constitutional Convention gave so much power to the Welfare Department. Because it's a constitutional agency.
Commission.
Yeah. So what resulted from the lawsuit, though, were 4 entities that do a pretty good job today. Rachel Holt is head of the Office of Juvenile Affairs. That was a direct result of this lawsuit. Joe Dorman runs the Oklahoma Institute of Child Advocacy. That came from this. The Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth came from there. And then DHS was relieved of the responsibility of taking care of all these children, and they couldn't monitor themselves. These other agencies had to monitor them, and they do a really pretty good job.
We have a picture of the book Throwaway Kids, your latest work. And I guess this was no fun to write.
Oh, no. In fact, my daughter transcribes many of the interviews. And she cried during some of the interviews, especially of one of the plaintiffs who, as a 14-year-old girl who had not committed a crime, but she was a runaway, and they put her in Girlstown in Tecumseh, and they hogtied her, and the staff in the first 24 hours raped her repeatedly. This was a story that was repeated over and over thousands of times. And so it shut down everything. Gene Stipe represented Mr. Rader, and he finally said, we finally put too much on Lloyd's back. And so Lloyd Rader was not a bad man. He did some good for Oklahoma. He saved University Hospital, but the agency was too big, and these institutions were in rural communities, and nobody was really watching over them.
Well, and we've progressed now to, at least insofar as DHS is concerned, to an outstanding person, Justin Brown, who's taken the lead there and just done marvelous things.
Yes, and to show what we have done to correct the situation in Oklahoma, Justin wrote a piece for the book in the end. Rachel writes a piece. Annette Jacoby at the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth writes a piece, and Joe does too, to show what we're doing. You know, it'll never be perfect, but we have a really good model system in Oklahoma for the treatment of juveniles, where in 1978 we had, and we weren't alone, but we had just a horrible system that treated juveniles like animals.
Well, let me change the subject just a bit.
Sure.
Well, not really the subject entirely, but I noted that your undergraduate degree was in journalism.
I'm a proud graduate of the Gaylord College. We didn't call it that in those days, but the journalism school at OU.
Well, you've used your journalism degree more than anybody I've ever heard
Well,
of
hey.
using their undergraduate degree,
Hey,
including
I have.
doctors.
Hey, I have. It's been wonderful, and I'm a great supporter of the journalism school now at OU. But
Now, how many books have you authored?
150.
And this is
this
number
book is
150?
150, right? I'm quitting at 200.
Well, the rumor is that you have authored more historical nonfiction books than anyone in history.
Well, that's what they say. I did a research on it one time, and Pearl Buck wrote 80 books, and there have been some other people who wrote 50 or 60 or sometimes 40, but certainly historical nonfiction, because all of mine except one are about Oklahoma heroes. But once, as a longtime Sunday school teacher, I wrote a biography of the Apostle Paul. Now, there are some churches in Oklahoma named St. Paul, so maybe he has an Oklahoma connection. But I had read lots of books about what Paul said, because he wrote so much of the New Testament, and what that meant. But I just wanted to do a biography of the man that, perhaps second only to Christ, took Christianity to another continent and to the world, you know. So I wrote a biography of Paul many years ago.
What's your day like? And I want you to hone down on kind of the writing element of your day.
I have always done my writing early in the mornings. Now, I grew up at Broken Bow, way out in the country, so far from town you had to go back toward town to hunt. So there wasn't a lot. So since I don't have a cow to milk anymore, since I was an only child, I usually get up very, very early. I like to be at the office at 5 a.m. And then there's nobody shows up till 9 o'clock. So for 4 hours, my goodness, I'm alone, and I can write, do research, whatever. And then I may do a lot of other things during the day. But in my retirement, which I'm trying to get down to 60 hours a week, I really want to spend 2/3 of my time writing, because I got a lot of book projects. You ought to see if you come to my office, there is a box after box after box of projects that I want to complete in the next couple of years. So lots of stories to tell.
Let me get in and take us to a break. We'll come back with another segment with Bob Burke. We're talking to Oklahoma's most prolific author, Bob Burke, today on The Verdict.
At Whitten Burridge, we're litigators. That's all we do. All of our clients, some sort of wrong has occurred to them. We try to right that wrong. Corporate America, they have all the power. It's sort of like going against an army. I like helping the underdog. That's what gets me up out of bed every day.
Our success rate is phenomenal, but that's not all they get. We care about people.
I'm very proud of what we've been able to do for our clients, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to do in the future. There's still a lot of wrongs that need to be righted.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Meyers. Our guest today is Bob Burke.
Bob, We talked a little bit off camera about what you're doing currently. Do you have any new books
Yes.
in the pipeline?
Well, in fact, this week,
This really is a pipeline of books, by the way.
yeah, this week, a biography of longtime public servant, federal judge, state senator Tim Leonard, district judge.
Classmate.
Oh yeah, it's okay. And so, federal judge Joe Heaton and I have co-authored a 400-page plus a biography of Tim. They tell me it came in yesterday. I've not seen it, but that comes out this week. Robert Henry and I have a book coming out this month, or certainly early next month, about Oklahoma's first 2 U.S. senators, Thomas P. Gore, a blind man, Gore Vidal's grandfather, and Robert Owen from Muskogee, the father of the Federal Reserve, introduced the bill. He was a friend of President Wilson's. He's known as the father of the Federal Reserve if you go to the Federal Reserve's website. And so that's kind of an interesting, and then I'm working on a biography of Burns Hargis, who has done about everything in life, from lawyering to being a great president of OSU.
And done them well.
Oh, yes. I'm doing a 25th anniversary history for next year of Paycom and Chad Richardson. It's a really neat story. And I've finished, it's in design right now, a history of the Oklahoma Bar Foundation. Also in design is a 50th anniversary book on Jesus House, a really neat story about their early days of Sister Ruth and Sister Betty, two ladies who took it on themselves to help people in need. And then I have finished, in fact, I have on my desk the final changes for a biography of Hal Smith, the great restaurateur who was a kid from Ardmore who has done so well with 90 restaurants across the country, great brands. And you'll learn in that book of why and how that the Louis chain was named after Bob Stoops' dog. Okay? Because it was Stoops' idea. It's a great story. And of why Upper Crust is called Upper Crust. So, but it's a neat story because Hal's a great guy. His final changes they delivered yesterday, I'm going to make those. And so it's a coffee table sized book. And oh my goodness, I have so many other projects. I want to do a biography of, for example, it'll be a hard book too, but the influence of the Ku Klux Klan in Oklahoma in the 1920s. Mississippi and Alabama get a bad rap for that, but no place was worse for the Klan. They even ran Jack Walton out of office as the governor of Oklahoma because he declared war on the Klan. He served 9 months and they impeached him and convicted him because Oklahoma was really quick to the trigger in the early days of statehood to impeach a governor. We don't like you, so we're going to impeach you and throw you out. But there are lots of stories to be told. I run across stories every week of something that needs to be told.
Let's talk about your day job, even though you claim to be retired. You're closely associated with Oklahoma's workers' comp laws and lawsuits.
Yes, well, I've done that for 42 years. All I've ever done as a lawyer. And so in my retirement, the legislature passed a horrible workers' comp law 8 years ago that gave Oklahoma the lowest benefits in the country. So I agreed to do all the appeals of that law free and no expense. And I've done 121 so far, 168 out of the first 78. So I continue to be, I never intended to be a constitutional lawyer. I was a country comp lawyer from Broken Bow. But I've taken that mantle on and do that across the country, in fact, where I believe that a workers' comp law, one horrible thing was called opt-out.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, it was about, in this law, 8 years ago, it set up a system that basically gutted all rights for injured workers. It was the worst thing that I'd ever seen, so I attacked it in Oklahoma. The Supreme Court found that allowing a company to opt out of the system and just decide what an injury was on their own and choose all the doctors and then just pay what you want to. And, it was the worst thing ever. So we defeated that in Oklahoma. Then I went nationwide to defeat it because some big companies tried to install that in conservative legislatures throughout the South. I testified before legislatures in Tennessee and Mississippi and South Carolina and North Carolina, and so we beat that out everywhere. And so opt-out is no longer a scourge, because it was the worst idea for injured workers that I had ever seen. Just awful, awful. So that is gone as a threat to the American worker.
How would you grade today Oklahoma's workers' comp system? A, B, C, D,
Well,
F?
we went from 51st in the country. The legislature 3 years ago did give us some relief, because I think many of the legislators have realized that they didn't have time to read the bill when it was passed 8 years ago, and they have given some relief, so we're up to 46th. And we have some prospects for raising it above that. So I would give it a C. Now, frankly, the Workers' Comp Commission that now runs new law cases, they're doing very fine. The commissioners are all above reproach. The new administrative system is working fine. The benefits are still too low, because I want to get just in the middle of the pack somewhere. We don't need to have the highest benefits in the country, but we certainly need to be middle of the road. And that's my goal. And so to borrow an old line from evangelist Billy Sunday in Chicago a century ago, as long as I'm alive, I'm just going to keep, and as long as I have teeth, I'm going to be gnawing on them. And when I lose my teeth, I'm going to gum them to death. No, seriously, with a smile, I just want to attack anything that's unconstitutional. We have a wonderful Constitution in this state. I'm a lover of the Constitution, and if the legislature or anybody goes against that, I'm going to fight them.
Let's get back to your book writing. What was your first book, and when was that?
Lyle Bourne, David Bourne's father, was the youngest man ever elected to the Congress in 1936. And when David was elected to the U.S. Senate, I spent Fridays. I would go by and, get the lint out of the dryer up on Chapel Hill where they lived, and I'd play dominoes with Lyle. Well, he's telling me stories about living in the same rooming house with Harry and Beth Truman and Lyndon and Claudia, or Lady Bird Johnson. And so I thought, well, somebody ought to write these down. So I joined with a law school professor, Von Creel, and we wrote Lyle's biography. And it became a passion. And so I just love telling stories. I don't play golf, so my relaxation comes from sitting 6 or 8 hours at a computer typing a story about Oklahoma, because it's a bold and exciting history, and it's really not about events and places. It's not about events that are world famous and unique in the world, like the Land Run or the Trail of Tears, but it's about our people. Our exciting history is about our people, because those who participated in the Land Run and who participated in so many of the unique events in world history.
Do you have a favorite book
Maybe,
that you've written?
Well, maybe Wiley Post. A kid from Maysville who had a prison record, one eye, and a sixth grade education, and a depression problem so bad that he got out of prison. But he was the first person to fly around the world. He discovered the jet stream and invented the spacesuit. And so it's a wonderful story of rehabilitation. But he was only 36 when he and Will Rogers died in 1935 at Point Barrow, Alaska. But maybe that is, because that has been translated into other languages and still is a seller here 30 years later.
We just have a minute left. Where are your books available generally?
Well,
if our viewers want.
Well, some of my older ones, I go to Amazon.com. I ordered 30 of them last week because I have like 80 books on used books. But the Oklahoma Hall of Fame website has many of the new books, and the new books will end up in the bookstores because Jim Talbert has always been very great about carrying it full circle, and Barnes and Noble. But Oklahoma Hall of Fame website is the greatest place to buy books, any of those, and I never do those for money. I always, if I did it for money, I ain't getting up that time in the morning to work, you know. So I love, and so any book that's ever been done is the proceeds go to some charity.
All right. Bob Burke, our guest today on The Verdict. Bob, thanks for all you've done for Oklahoma, and I hope your book is well read and well remembered. Throwaway Kids, something we should learn from and not forget.
Hey, thanks, Mick. Thank you, Kent.
Keep ink in your pen.
Okay, I will.
Kent and I'll be back after this.
This is the epidemic of my generation. This is my HIV. This is my Black Plague.
In the midst of one of our state's largest crises,
Oklahomans are dying from this preventable and treatable disease on a daily basis.
we believe there's hope.
That little pill will cause destruction through your whole life.
Watch the entire award-winning 9-part docuseries Killing Pain, made available by Fighting Addiction Through Education at killingpain.com.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
Well, we had too much show. There was still a lot of Bob Burke we could have extracted.
Yes, but it was all good.
It was.
And that will be fodder for our next show with Bob.
If you'd like more information on Bob and all of his work, both legal and literary, his website is bobburkelaw.net, bobburkelaw.net. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. You can log on. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a subject you'd like to see us discuss, and we'll do our best to get to that. But we do need to have Bob back on.
Yes, we'll be in touch and do that.
Okay. We know how to find him.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on The Verdict. We'll be back next week with another show. I'll see you then.